Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here's a look at some of the stories we have lined up for you tonight. Wildfires continue to rage across the country as more residents of Newfoundland and Labrador are forced from their homes. Plus, U.S. President Donald Trump celebrates 200 days back in office by slapping countries with more tariffs. And pop singer Katy Perry gets a geography lesson from an Alberta superfan.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. Newfoundland and Labrador continue to face raging wildfires that are forcing more and more people from their homes. Premier John Hogan announced today that another 900 people have been forced to evacuate.
There will be an evacuation order for 2 more communities, Ochre Pit Cove and Salmon Cove. So individuals in the communities will be ordered to evacuate, and they will be asked to move and register at the at the Carbonear Academy. So happy to report, as I suggested, that the request has been approved, and the Canadian Armed Forces will now be deploying a reconnaissance element to assist and assess the wildfire situation to determine how the armed forces can best support our requirements right now. And based on the current need and capacity, the Canadian Armed Forces will be providing personnel to assist with planning and coordination, personnel to assist ongoing firefighter efforts with firefighters as needed, transportation of essential goods and personnel, and logistical support.
Roughly 300 Canadian military members are currently helping with fires in Saskatchewan. There are about 3,000 scattered evacuees in the Prairie Province. Officials in BC are expressing concern about an increased risk in wildfires. The BC Wildfire Service says that a drying trend starting this weekend could increase the potential for more fires. The province's Minister of Forest notes that there's been an uptick in fire activity since last week.
Since my last update a week ago, many parts of British Columbia have certainly seen an uptick in wildfire activity. As predicted, recent summer storms led to nearly 70,000 lightning strikes in the past week, which has led to a sudden increase in the number of wildfires.
Over the last 7 days, we have seen significant drying in most of the province, particularly in the southern half of the province. Yeah, in terms of the rest of August and even into September, I wouldn't say there's anywhere in BC that I would say there's no hazard left there. And we're not seeing that late August sort of rain event that knocks down the hazard for the rest of the year. So that's why we continue to be in this kind of up and down cycle this year.
Right now, there are about 120 wildfires burning across British Columbia. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff hike has hit the world. Trump marked 200 days back in office by slapping more than 60 countries and the European Union with more levies, ranging from 10% to 50%. At the same time, Trump was in the Oval Office today with economist Steve Moore, looking at how Americans are doing when it comes to household income.
This is based on unpublished Census Bureau data. It will be released sometime in the next 6 months, but we get an advanced look at it. And so I was telling the president in his first 5 months in office, starting in January through the end of June, the average median household income adjusted for inflation for the average family in America is already up $1,174. That's an
incredible number. Yeah. Just came out.
Just came out. So that's a giant gain.
And if I would have said this, nobody would have believed me. There's your number.
Well, there are differing views on how tariffs are impacting Americans. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has been pretty blunt. On CNN this week, Ford said a tariff on Canada is a tax on American people. He also said Canada and other countries are now diversifying their trade, which will also impact the U.S. And speaking of tariffs and Trump, the U.S. president's 2-week deadline on Russian President Vladimir Putin for a ceasefire on Ukraine is fast approaching. The deadline was originally a month, but Trump shortened it with the hopes of accelerating the ceasefire, or else Russia would face large sanctions in the form of tariffs. Trump and Putin have now agreed to meet in principle, although a date has not been confirmed. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff also met with Putin, but it failed to produce any steps toward a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine. With more details, here is Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk.
Now recall that it was a longer period of time, and now he has shortened that to say you have 2 weeks to act, because both him and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, have called out Vladimir Putin, saying you're just playing out the clock, you're just having talks about having more talks, and we're not going to have it. So we want to see some action. So now the good thing he's doing from a foreign policy standpoint is that sanctions are still on the table. So just the fact that Putin's coming to the table will not dampen that, or kind of take the sanctions off the table or have them off the hook for any of those punitive measures. And in the weeks that we have been waiting for some sort of ceasefire or some sort of off-ramp for Putin, we've actually seen an escalation in the war, which makes the case that many have made in the West that we should give more supplies to Ukraine, even though the Trump administration was hoping to end this war and not put more resources into this war. It looks like all of those options are still on the table, and we shall see what will come of a meeting, a direct meeting now between Putin and Trump. We hope that something actually concrete will come in the next week or so.
Catch my full interview with Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, coming up right after business news. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has unveiled plans to table the Canadian Sovereignty Act in the fall session of Parliament. Speaking at a news conference in Calgary, Poilievre says the bill would counter illegal foreign tariffs and get Canada back to work. He says the legislation would repeal laws making it difficult to build pipelines and mines and remove the industrial carbon tax.
Under the Liberal government, that sovereignty has been eroded by policies that block our development, tax our people, and make us uncompetitive. The Canadian Sovereignty Act would move us in the opposite direction. It seeks to legalize economic development, reward those who build, protect Canadian innovation, and get shovels in the ground on major nation-building projects between now and March the 14th, the one-year anniversary of Mark Carney taking office. Outside of the bill, we are making a call to action. Today, Conservatives are calling on Prime Minister Carney to have pipeline construction underway for at least 2 projects and to have at least 1 new natural gas liquefaction project and a road to the Ring of Fire in Ontario under construction by the first anniversary of him taking office. The Prime Minister can and must do this, and he can do it by consulting First Nations as required under Section 35 of the Constitution. Now, you might say this is too ambitious. How could you possibly get a pipeline under construction in mere months? Well, he's been in office already since last March, and he said, and I quote, we need to think big and act bigger. We need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations. I couldn't agree more. That doesn't happen through meetings, through plans and speeches and forums and press releases. It happens through action.
Prime Minister Carney, meantime, is calling on Métis leaders to help transform the economy in response to an increasingly unsteady trade relationship with the United States under President Donald Trump. During a meeting scheduled to discuss his government's major projects legislation, Carney said building up the Canadian economy will rely on partnerships with Indigenous peoples and that the partnership has the potential to benefit all.
Today's summit is about the future of our economy. It's about the future of Canada. I say future of Canada and our nations because it's about how we can build in all senses, particularly how we can build together, and how we can build an economy that moves from reliance to resilience, from division to unity, from silos to true partnership. When we look back over our history, Métis have played a pivotal role. As skilled traders, as voyageurs, and we're drawing on deep knowledge of our land, our waterways, and the seasons, created the original trade networks, helped create the original trade networks across this land. And in some respects, our task today is part of a process of creating new trade networks, new forms of commerce in Canada, both with full recognition this time, full recognition of Métis contributions and full Métis access to the opportunities and the prosperity that this building will create.
Bill C-5 gives Ottawa power to fast-track projects it deems to be in the national interest by sidestepping environmental protections and other legislations. A family caught in a shootout between Montreal police and an armed suspect last year is seeking $6.5 million in damages from the city and police.
Their legal action has a clear purpose, which is to restore to the family the resources to live a dignified and stable life, as they did before the police intervention. The consequences they have endured are profound. Today, the father has lost his autonomy. He requires constant care, much of which is provided by the mother, who herself suffers from her trauma. As for the children, they now bear a burden that is not theirs to carry, taking on parental responsibilities that no child should have to assume. The City of Montreal and its police service should make it possible for the family to regain a full and long-term recovery.
In other news, Lethbridge police have charged the semi-trailer driver involved in the Whoop-Up Bridge incident. On Wednesday morning, a semi-truck with a flatbed loaded with 2 excavating vehicles was traveling to a West Lethbridge construction site. The driver made a wrong turn into Indian Battle Park and proceeded under the Whoop-Up Bridge overpass, striking the bridge girders and eventually becoming stuck. Significant damage was done to both the bridge and excavating equipment being hauled. The driver contacted police immediately, who attended and closed the east and west lanes of Whoop-Up Drive. The bridge was reopened later that morning with fewer lanes operational. And after Wednesday's incident involving the semi-trailer, crews from the City of Lethbridge continue to assess damage to Whoop-Up Drive Bridge. Joel Sanchez, the Director of Infrastructure Services, says motorists using Whoop-Up Drive for their daily commute will be facing some additional traffic challenges.
It's too early to say any potential damage to the bridge. We're just taking the pictures and also doing the measurements and the assessment in order to send that back. It might take probably a few days to go into the details. Yesterday, when the truck was being pulled out of the site, we needed to ensure that there was some support for the structure in case when we move it out, anything was going to shift. It didn't happen. They're going to remain there in place, but that's part of the precautionary measures that we're trying to do. We know there is damage. We don't know the extent of the damage. It will take us some time to assess. And also, based on what we find, there might be some testing that needs to be done in order to define for how long these repairs will be going on. What we're doing at this time is we're putting a preliminary plan in order to have contingency plans in place or different options, and that's what the team is working with the consultants that are supporting us.
Beginning today, the city will make further adjustments to traffic flow. The loop from northbound Scenic Drive onto Whoop-Up Drive will be reopened, and westbound 6th Avenue into Whoop-Up Drive will be reopened, among others. And due to the heavy traffic delays created on Wednesday by the Whoop-Up Bridge incident, many are wondering if a third vehicular bridge will be built. In 2022, Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously to accept an administration submission on the third bridge river crossing review. Preliminary traffic volumes from the city's travel demand model, updated for the Transportation Master Plan in 2023, suggest that a third vehicular river crossing may be needed sometime between 2030 and 2040. Bridge City News asked Joel Sanchez, the city's Director of Infrastructure Services, and this is what he said.
The only thing I can comment about the third bridge is that the currently plans that we have is to have a preliminary design by 2027. That's still happening. In 2027, we will have a consultant that will be doing that. But if there is a need to do anything like that type of proposal, it will be part of the new CIP that will be presented to the new council in the fall of 2026.
By the way, a non-binding ballot question in the 2021 municipal election asked voters what they thought, and 60% of respondents said they wanted a third bridge built in our city. On the lighter side, for lovers of theater and good music, New West Theater is thrilled to bring to stage Decades Remixed, a journey through rock and roll history from the 50s to the present. Jessica Enns is the co-director and choreographer for the show. She says the audience will experience unforgettable nights of music and memories.
It's a very quick pace. We go through from 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. We've got something for everybody. One of the acts has a lot of medleys that have just sort of snippets of different songs pieced together, and then another act has the full meal deal, allow people to kind of really soak up the entire experience. Piggybacking off of what we were talking about of different years and different groupings of working with people, I think that the timing is quite nostalgic too. Like, I think there's been 2 shows in the summer or 1 show in the summer, but it's a mainstay. And I think that people expect the review show at that time, but then it's also just sort of everyone circles back and you get to come home around that same time. I think our demographic is everybody, because we span from 50s onwards, so there's definitely something for every single music lover. And
summer is a kind of fun, breezy, sort of more rock and roll kind of time. This is like big laughs, big songs, big power ballads, because of course the 80s are part of the show, and a lot of great tunes. And then peppered in are some comedy sketches and some fun costumes
Beautiful
and fashions
costumes.
designed by our costume designer, Teresa Haburn. It's exciting, I think, to evoke, evoking music nostalgia for the audience. It's getting back together with some people and putting these shows together, because we've got the numbers, but we also build a lot of the comedy ourselves. It's a really sort of do-it-yourself, put it all together as a company experience that's pretty wonderful. We have songs going all the way back to the 50s, and the most recent song is 2024. There's going to be songs that your 12 or 13-year-old might not recognize from the 50s. There's definitely going to be songs that grandma's not going to recognize from 2024. So grandma should probably bring the 12-year-old so that they can tell each other about what's going on.
It'll be a whole lot of confusion. Looks like fun. To get tickets, you can visit newwesttheatre.com. The show runs from today, August 7th, till August the 23rd. And speaking of music and the stage, pop sensation Katy Perry and a Redcliffe, Alberta superfan put the city of Medicine Hat on the map. At her concert at Vancouver's Rogers Arena, Perry brought fan Bladen Palumbo on stage, and when she asked where he was from, she went through the formative experience of being conceptually introduced to the gas city. Following her wide-eyed reaction to the name Medicine Hat, she asked, "Your hats are filled with medicine?" Take a look.
I just put my hands up in the air like a crazy person and just screamed at the top of my lungs, and she noticed me, and I was just screaming, "Pick me, you need to notice me."
I said Medicine Hat, Alberta. Medicine Hat? Medicine Hat? Correct. Medicine Hat? Correct. Your hats are full of medicine. If you say so.
I definitely did expect her to not know where Medicine Hat was. But with that being said, though, I do live in Redcliffe. So when you say Redcliffe, people are like, what? But when you say Medicine Hat, people are like, oh, I know where that is. But for her being a big superstar like that, I totally knew that she didn't know where that was.
She's so quirky, but you gotta love her. By the way, Medicine Hat inherited its name from the Blackfoot word samus, an eagle tail headdress worn by medicine men in a number of Blackfoot legends. So interesting. Well, we could see a slight chance of showers tonight and an even higher chance tomorrow before some incredibly warm days ahead. I'll be right back with your full forecast. Well, we have a slight chance of showers with a risk of thunderstorms this evening and a 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds from the west. Now, here's how our Friday is shaping up, meaning how our weekend is beginning. So we're also seeing that 20 to 40K winds, 60% chance of showers beginning late morning through the afternoon tomorrow. Risk of thunderstorms as well, high of only 19 degrees. So not great if you love the sunshine and are after that. However, after Friday, Saturday begins the rest of the week is just going to be lovely if you are a sunbather or you're looking for some fun in the sun, because that's what we're going to have. So 25 for the high on Saturday, 27 on Sunday, up to 28 Monday, 31 on Tuesday, and then back to 26 degrees on Wednesday with a mix of sun and cloud. Most of those days also very clear skies and sunshine. So average high for this time of year, 26 degrees, average low 11 degrees. 35 was our record high on this day back in 1970. 1909, Lethbridge had its coldest day on record, which was only 4 degrees. 6:10 is when the sun rose this morning, sunset this evening at 9:03 p.m., giving us 14 hours, 53 minutes of daylight, so 3 minutes shorter of a day than yesterday. Okay, here's our national forecast for tomorrow. On the west coast, mainly sunny skies, Victoria high of 20 degrees, 40K winds in that Juan de Fuca Strait, high of 21 in Vancouver. Could see some cloud coverage by the afternoon there. 22 for the high in Edmonton tomorrow. Edmonton seeing 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, risk of thunderstorms as well. Calgary under a severe thunderstorm watch this evening. Tomorrow, tomorrow, we've got up to 20 millimeters of rain, risk of a thunderstorm. In Saskatoon, 10 to 15 millimeters of rain expected with a risk of thunderstorm. 20 degrees for the high of 21 in Regina. Regina under a severe thunderstorm watch this evening as well. Tomorrow, though, 60% chance of showers, risk of thunderstorm. Winnipeg, widespread smoke tonight. Air quality warnings in effect. Into tomorrow, we are seeing showers and thunderstorms there with a high of 22 degrees. Okay, so that's a very rainy prairie, if you ask me, but the rest of the country fairly sunny. So Toronto sitting at 30 with sunshine. Ottawa 31 with mix of sun and cloud. Montreal hot and humid. So we've got the humidex at 35. High of 30 degrees, mix of sun and cloud there. Sunshine with fog dissipating in the morning in Fredericton, high of 30 degrees, high 28 in Halifax, 28 also in Charlottetown with beautiful clear skies. Actually, St. John's under a heat warning, high of 28 degrees, but high humidity. Could see 24 near the water and clear skies. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Ontario is taking a step toward planning new pipelines to bring in Alberta oil and gas for refining as it issues a request for proposal on a feasibility study. It follows a memorandum of understanding which Premiers Scott Moe, Doug Ford and Danielle Smith signed in July to build new pipelines as well as rail lines to take Ontario's critical minerals to port in Western Canada. Ontario's feasibility study is set to explore a new port outlet on James Bay, Hudson Bay and the Great Lakes, and look at a new or expanding refinery along the pipeline route. Ottawa says it's backing a key ruling from Canada's telecom regulator, one that opens the door for more competition in the high-speed internet market. Industry Minister Melanie Joly says the decision means the country's biggest internet providers can now offer service over fiber networks built by their competitors, but only outside of their home territories. Canadian Tire Corporation posted a lower second quarter profit than last year as its revenue increased by about 5%. The Toronto-based retailer says net income totaled $168.2 million for the quarter, compared with $207.7 million a year ago. The company says the completion of its Helly Hansen sale and multiple expenses related to its True North transformation program caused the drop in profits. Revenue for the quarter totaled $4.2 billion. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 159 points on the day to finish at 27,761. The Dow was down 224 points to 43,968. The S&P 500 was down 5 to 6340, and the Nasdaq was up 73 points to finish at 21,242. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 56 cents to 63.78 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to 3.07 U.S. Gold was up 27.04 to 33.9607 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 42 cents at 38.26 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.35 per bushel. Barley is at $5.88. Canola is at $15.30. And corn is at $7.24 per bushel. Live cattle were up $2.45 to $238.75. Feeder cattle were up $3.62 to $348.65. Lean hogs were down 10 cents to $108.77. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 72.70 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Newfoundland and Labrador continue to face raging wildfires that are forcing more and more people from their homes. Premier John Hogan announced today that another 900 people have been forced to evacuate. The Canadian military has been called in and will be providing assistance. And in international news, U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff hike takes effect. Russia and Ukraine ceasefire deadline looms, and brutal attacks against Christians in Mozambique are being reported. A lot to discuss with our foreign affairs expert Lisa Davtari coming up next. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. Lots Lots happening in international news, and our foreign affairs expert, editor-in-chief for the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, joins us from Los Angeles to break it all down. Welcome back, Lisa. Great to have you on again.
Great to be on with you, Jeanette. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Okay, so Lisa, as I said, lots happening. So U.S. President Donald Trump marks his 200th day back in office. That's hard to believe. As tariffs take a significant jump on dozens of countries, which take effect today. And his amended tariff plan hit some countries with higher rates, like 50% for goods from Brazil. Canada was hit with 35%. And now the economic impact of his earlier tariffs has begun to show visible harm to the U.S. economy. So what are your thoughts on these actions, Lisa?
Well, if you ask him or the head of his treasury,
Let's
they'll
get him on the
say
phone right now. We'll
right.
find out.
This is, it'll be kind of the it'll be this curve that will correct itself and then, make America great again in terms of its economy and in terms of authority on the global stage, in terms of many specific supply chains, and then dealing with certain trade partners. So we know the trade partners that have sat down with Donald Trump have seen decent deals. They have walked away with a lower bracket in terms of tariffs, and others who have not stepped up yet are dealing with the consequences, as you said, that go into effect today. So obviously the markets will respond and the economy will respond, and there's definitely been a slowdown globally. So we will have to wait and see if this is going to be this growing pains as the Trump administration has envisioned, and it will again be what he had set out to do, which is bring a lot of industries back to the United States, make the playing field fair in terms of many of our trade deals and trade partners, and to bring these partners again back to the table. So according to the Secretary of Treasury, Besant, he said, there's a line of countries that want to still come to the White House and have talks with Donald Trump regarding bringing down the tariffs, making better deals. We know the EU just compromised on a deal with Donald Trump, for lack of a better word. But we do want to see deals across the board that will benefit both sides, bring businesses back to the West, and again, reset or recalibrate the global scale in terms of the economy.
And I guess speaking of tariffs or sanctions, it's been reported that President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed in principle to meet. So no date yet has been confirmed. And as we remember, that 2-week deadline that Trump put on Putin for a ceasefire with Ukraine is upon us. So what do you think is going to happen with that deadline, Lisa?
It's scary because when you set deadlines and when you draw lines in the sand and when you make a red line, or however you want to put it, you have to act on it. And Donald Trump knows that very well. He is the master of deals and of negotiations and of threats and of ultimatums and deadlines. So yes, we are coming upon the end of the 2-week period that he gave Putin. Now recall that it was a longer period of time, and now he has shortened that to say you have 2 weeks to act, because both him and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, have called out Vladimir Putin, saying you're just playing out the clock, you're just having talks about having more talks, and we're not going to have it. So we want to see some action. So now the good thing he's doing from a foreign policy standpoint is that sanctions are still on the table. So just the fact that Putin's coming to the table will not dampen that, or kind of take the sanctions off the table or have them off the hook for any of those punitive measures. But at the same time, I think the Trump administration has every right to be proud of the fact that they did get Putin to at least come to the table. Now we're hoping for some sort of de-escalation in the weeks that we have been waiting for, some sort of ceasefire or some sort of off-ramp for Putin. We have actually seen an escalation in the war, which makes the case that many have made in the West that we should give more supplies to Ukraine, even though the Trump administration was hoping to end this war and not put more resources into this war. It looks like all of those options are still on the table, and we shall see what will come of a meeting, a direct meeting now between Putin and Trump. We know that his envoy has met with Putin. Nothing has come of that, but we hope that something actually concrete will come in the next week or so.
Right, and I think Putin probably doesn't respond well to threats, so it will be interesting to see what happens. And you were mentioning that the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, I believe it is, he met with Putin, right?
Yes.
And Trump is declaring it as highly productive on his Truth Social. So it looks like it may have failed to produce any steps towards a ceasefire for now. But what other details can you share on that part of it, Lisa?
Yeah. It's interesting because in Putin's world, this was yet again a talk about having another talk. But on the Trump side, the perspective is, well, we didn't come up with any concrete resolutions, or we didn't have anything quite materialize out of this particular meeting, but Steve Witkoff was basically able to warm him up, and now he's open to a meeting with Trump. So we hope that that is true, and that is in fact what is going on, that we are working towards something, and we will see something materialize in the next week as we come to the ultimatum. But as you said, Putin doesn't really respond well. He is a madman. He is a dictator. He is somebody who is looking to grow the empire, and that in Putin's language, his might, his power is defined by how many acres of land he has. And that is exactly what he's trying to do, is to add on to Russia, to annex, to take over Ukraine. And that's what he set out to do. Obviously, I don't think he imagined it taking quite as long as it has taken, or for it to be as bloody or as costly as it has been for the Russian side and, of course, the Ukrainian side. So now we shall see. What will it take for Putin to actually think he will get a good deal out of this? What will it take? And Trump, to be fair, has set out from the beginning to say both sides have to compromise, meaning Zelensky will have to give up something, and Putin will obviously have to end this war and de-escalate as soon as possible. But we will see if the offer that Trump makes, the deal that he offers him, will be enough for this madman to end this war.
And Lisa, have you heard any details about involving Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky in these talks?
That is not clear as of yet. I believe that right now we were talking about direct talks, which would signal Putin meeting alone with Trump. Now, I think that would be, just from a strategic perspective, a better move to see him alone, have the talks, get him to at least to understand what it will take, and then to go back to Zelensky and really make him take that deal. And I think that is what Trump has pretty much set up Zelensky to accept, to say that, listen, we're going to end this war, but you'll have to compromise and you'll have to give up. So it'll be very difficult. I think this is one of the more difficult. I know we're dealing with the Middle East, we're dealing with Gaza, we're dealing with many of these Iran regime proxies right now, and that has been the focus of our foreign policy, has really been the Middle East. But obviously this war marches on in the background and has gone on way too long. It has been, again, bloody, costly, devastating for both sides, really. And really, the missing piece here is to get Putin to agree to something that makes sense. So we shall see. All eyes are on this meeting, direct meeting, and hopefully Trump can get it done.
Yeah. Lisa, turning our attention now to Mozambique. So reports are coming out of brutal attacks led by ISIS-aligned soldiers, where they're beheading Christians, burning churches and homes. And the Middle East Media Research Institute, which is a counterterrorism research nonprofit, they're sounding the alarm of what it describes as a silent genocide taking place against Christians. And Lisa, this is absolutely terrifying and horrific.
Right. And the word silent and genocide should not go in the same sentence, particularly in today's environment, when all these social media activists and influencers are talking about a genocide going on in Gaza, which is not in fact true, but in fact it is going on in other parts of the world where no one is paying attention. And the slaughter of Christians in these parts of the world are in fact true. And I thank you, Jeanette, for bringing attention to this. And of course, my friends and colleagues at MEMRI, the independent media institute that you alluded to, which has been focused on really bringing out these stories that no one else is covering in the media out to to the world to understand what is exactly happening. You know, ISIS, we said ISIS is done, ISIS is gone, they're on the march, but yes, they are operating in these parts of the world, and they are fixated on churches, they are fixated on Christian communities, they are fixated on underground churches and others who practice in these predominantly Muslim areas, and obviously are targeted for their Christianity, for their faith, and for practicing their faith. And here you have it. The sheer numbers are unbelievable. The footage that is coming out. I also want to turn people's attention to the Druze community in Syria, another genocide that no one is paying attention to, being slaughtered to death. I mean, grandmothers and children and families just wholesale being taken out just because of their faith and because they are living under Islamist rule. Again, Syria, the government that Donald Trump and many others in the West are trying to trust and they said that they are the 2.0, the new face, and we want to trust them and believe them, but they are all either, you know, descendants of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and others, or being supported by Iran's regime. We have other proxies operating in the area that are doing the same thing. So it's an ideology, it's not politics. We have to eradicate an ideology. We can sit down with politics, we can sit down and negotiate, but with an ideology, you cannot move the needle. And the numbers, the sheer numbers, the videos, the footage that is coming out of Mozambique and other parts of the world where Christians are being slaughtered wholesale. I mean, something we must pay attention to and really underscore, highlight. Where's the UN? Where are the women's groups? Where are the Christian groups? Where are the advocacy groups? We need to pay more attention.
Terrifying for sure. Okay, so Lisa, the Associated Press is coming under fire for publishing a story which many on social media viewed as sympathetic to Hezbollah terrorists. So now we remember that the article covered the covert Israeli operation of simultaneous detonations of members' pagers and other electronic devices. We remember when that happened. So AP's story particularly focused on the members of Hezbollah and their struggle to recover from Israel's pager attack. No mention that those targeted are part of a terrorist organization, mind you. And now AP described them as, it looks like they described them as officials and fighters. So has AP responded to this backlash?
It's like opposite day every single day in the media, mainstream media, and on social media. I mean, I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and I've never had a time where you have so much of mainstream infrastructure. Now, there's always fringe. There are always people that will support terror groups. There's always people that will be sympathetic to the Iran regime or other terrorists or other murderers. But I've never seen this blind just adherence to a fake social media agenda to support terrorists, to support murderers, to support those who have blood on their hands. I'm talking about, you know, a segment of the population that thinks they are doing what is right, thinking that they are advocating for the underdog, thinking that they're advocating for women and children and LGBTQ and all of the other marginalized groups in this world, but yet supporting the same terrorists and murderers who are targeting those marginalized groups. So it makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I deal with this every single day in the media, in social media. And of course, you have the AP and others that are complicit. I mean, just think about October 7th. How many of these mainstream media platforms actually were hiring Hamas fighters that were on and basically in on it, for lack of a better term, that went in with with Hamas, came out with Hamas, and then they sold those videos to mainstream platforms that many of us know and watch and read, and to think that that is where we're getting our news. I mean, it's really horrific. That is why we rely on so many independent media personalities and platforms to get us the news, because it is really difficult to trust the mainstream media these days. Why are we shilling for Hezbollah, an absolutely murderous a terrorist platform that has American blood on its hands, has European blood on its hands, has Lebanese blood on its hands, killing, of course, Israeli blood on its hands, and we are sitting here and applauding them and giving them a platform, treating them like a sovereign government when they're not. They're a cancerous cell within Lebanon. The Lebanese don't even know what to do with them. So yes, it is very, very awkward to see a media platform that is trusted, that is read, well read across the world, shilling for a terrorist organization.
Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk, thanks so much for joining me today from Los Angeles. Appreciate having you on, as always.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you for having me.
A group of researchers from all over the world are closely examining the long-term effects that spaceflight has on the human mind and body. There are 2 Canadian experts involved in the research project, and they are both from our own University of Lethbridge. Joining us today to tell us more about this is Dr. Gerlinda Metz. She is a professor with the University of Lethbridge's Canadian Centre for Behavioral Neuroscience. Dr. Metz, it's great to have you with us. Welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much, Naveen. I'm glad to be here.
Well, great to have you back on our show again. And it must be exciting to be working with a team of experts from all around the world. Can you just share a little bit more about what this research will be trying to accomplish?
So we're very excited that we're part of this very significant project because it is NASA's largest ever research effort with human subjects, with astronauts. And so they're actually attempting to integrate an immense amount of data all together into one cohesive database to make better sense of health for astronauts. And this project is directed by Dr. Afshin Beheshti, who is a professor and director of the Space Biomedicine Institute at the University of Pittsburgh. And he has a long record of working with NASA. And on the team are also Tony Montina, who is the NMR and MRI facility director here at the University of Lethbridge. So we're very excited to be a part of this large research effort.
So you're talking about the University of Pittsburgh, you're talking about NASA. How did all this come together, and why the University of Lethbridge?
Actually, we already had established collaboration with NASA for a number of years. We have helped them to investigate molecules in the body, in blood and urine that we obtained from space, from the astronauts who lived on the International Space Station for a prolonged mission. And so these projects have been going very well. And we were invited to continue this collaboration and actually expand with additional numbers of samples. And so here now we have access to this very significant amount of data so that we can integrate our data with their database that involves multiple levels of biological regulations that are linked to spaceflight. And this is a really exciting project and very important also as a learning experience, not only for space flight, because we are going into becoming a more of a spacefaring civilization these days, but really we're also learning important lessons for life on Earth as well.
So what is your role in particular going to be focusing on?
So our project will focus on molecular chemistry. We will actually investigate small molecules called metabolites in urine and blood of astronauts. So they're giving us samples from before they went to space, during the space station stay in the mission, and then after they returned back to Earth. And so we have a long time course of regular samples being collected, which is very exciting. And so we can actually look at individual astronaut samples and how they changed over time, but we can also compare across different individuals. And what is also really phenomenal in this project is that for the first time we'll have a larger group of female astronauts, because small astronauts are males. And we didn't actually have many studies that investigated sex differences, so how females compare to males. And females have very different health conditions and stress responses than males. And it is very important to learn more about how do we better while we're on a long duration space mission, and what do we expect in terms of health outcomes, what can we predict for male versus female astronauts.
So you're talking about blood and urine samples before they go to space and then after they return home. What kind of differences have you noticed with these blood and urine samples before and after?
It's very interesting that actually males adapt a little bit faster to the stress and the mission when they're going to the International Space Station than females would. And we need to take this into account in what kind of markers we're looking for. And it's very important to look at these small metabolites, these small molecules in very accessible samples like urine that you can easily provide, so we can follow up with health measurements. And this is important when we go to space, because space is a very, very harsh environment. These astronauts are going through extreme levels of stress, not only psychologically, but also physiologically and physically. We have also microgravity or zero gravity. We have lower levels of a magnetic field than we have on Earth. We have very cold temperatures. We have very dry air. We also have various levels of radiation. This is a very harsh environment that astronauts enter into, and there are all kinds of health complications that they might be at risk. And so we want to better understand, with looking at these molecules, what risks are they to be expected, but also how can we produce countermeasures and treatments for them to prevent these adverse health outcomes for them.
And you mentioned one of your colleagues, Tony Montina, who is also working on the project. Can you explain a bit about what his focus will be on?
So my colleague, Tony Montina, he's the director of the NMR facility. We're using what we call nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. That is a mouthful, but what we're doing is we study small molecules. And when you look, for example, at a urine sample, you actually have 200 different types of these small molecules you can measure. So it's like a very personal fingerprint of what is going on inside of the body. Every cell is producing these small metabolites, and they are then measurable in liquids or in any tissue of the body. But here, when we work with urine, we have to make sure we're looking at these metabolites as a kind of a reflection of what is going on inside the body and inside our cells.
It's just so fascinating how spaceflight can affect your body and can affect the mind. And apparently spaceflight also affects mitochondria, which generate energy for the human cell. What do we know about how and why mitochondria is changed by spaceflight, and what are some potential solutions?
So mitochondria are like the powerhouses of the cell. Every cell has mitochondria. And what happens when we're going through extreme stress, or we're especially entering a space environment, these mitochondria might go into, some at least, into a dysfunctional state. This is such an extreme impact on the body to go to space with all the different stresses going on, that mitochondria might be disrupted in their normal function. So they actually produce less energy than what we would like to see and what the body would need. Because every cell has mitochondria, and because organs are made out of cells, cells can actually lead to diseases in various organs through mitochondrial disruption. So this is something that is a very important learning experience, because what we're seeing also in aging on Earth often is that mitochondria become dysfunctional. So we actually learn a great deal about aging on Earth. So what can we do about it? That's an important question. And we have actually developed on Earth, through many clinical studies, various drug treatments that can improve mitochondrial function. Now that we know that's actually based on Dr. Afshin Beheshti's work, that mitochondria are dysfunctional in space. We can use and test some of these therapies that we have available, and maybe even dietary countermeasures could be effective. So, for example, think of antioxidants that reduce the amount of cellular stress that would protect mitochondria in their function. There are many other ways of how drugs could affect and boost mitochondrial function. And so these need to be tested now that we have realized that there is an issue. We can now hopefully help astronauts stay healthier for longer in space.
And I'm told that astronauts have a higher risk of cancer, and you had mentioned earlier that there's a lot of radiation up in space, so that might be behind it. But what else would be behind it other than radiation? And will your research be exploring this area as well?
So cancer, indeed, like you say, is a very important risk factor that we need to take into account for space flight. And we have low levels of radiation. We also have ionizing, very strong resources of radiation, such as solar flares produced when the sun is very active and it's going through cycles where it's more or less active. And when it's highly active, this is more putting a higher risk on the body. Also, we have cosmic radiation that is always there, and we have ionizing radiation when particles meet the Earth's magnetic field. So we have various sources of radiation that can potentially cause cancer. So that is a significant risk factor. We are also worried about that, for example, for pilots who actually go into higher levels of in our atmosphere, and they also experience potentially higher levels of radiation by flying. So we need to learn about these health risks. What this radiation can actually do is induce DNA damage. So that's the genetic code in our cells, and that can actually trigger some cancerous risk factors that lead to tumor growth in the body. And we have to learn about these risks and also how to prevent them, potentially through drugs or dietary countermeasures.
And what about eye disorders from spaceflight? What is it that affects the eyes negatively?
Yeah, there are actually various risk factors again when we go to outer space. First of all, the weightlessness we're going through lower levels of gravity is shifting the fluids in the body. And actually, we have more liquids, more fluids going into our heads and our upper body. So this actually can affect the eyes, and often we're seeing also that faces become more puffy over time when they're in space. We might adapt to that with longer periods in space to some degree, but still we still talk about this kind of puffy face or moon face in astronauts because the fluids in the body are moving up. So this can also change the pressure inside of the brain. It can also change the pressure inside of our eye bulbs. And it will push the eye bulbs to be flatter than we usually have, which leads to the picture not displaying correctly on the retina. In addition, we also have issues with radiation that can harm the retina, which includes nerve cells and the optic nerve as well. So we might have some degenerative changes there over time. And that's something to be concerned about as well.
And then there's some other health risks. I'll just list off a few here. Cardiovascular disease, renal issues such as kidney stones, disruption of circadian rhythms are also risks. And I've even heard that some astronauts experience bone loss.
Yeah, that's actually a factor that many think of first when they think about space flights, because with the zero gravity or low levels of putting our weight on the body, we are losing bone mass over time. And that's something we also experience on Earth with aging, that often we do have more breakable bones, more sensitive bones. And so astronauts experience that at a much higher, faster rate than we have on Earth. So astronauts might experience 1% of bone loss in actually a few days, whereas on Earth we experience 3% of bone loss within a decade. So it goes really, really fast for astronauts. And that's because they don't put enough weight on their legs, for example. So the legs become very sensitive to damage. And there are several countermeasures. For example, astronauts are recommended to exercise for at least 2 hours a day. Exercise helps, and muscle activity is important because also we lose muscle mass when we're in outer space, for the same reasons that we're not putting enough weight on our limbs and we don't stay upright.
Dr. Gerlinda Metz is a professor with the University of Lethbridge's Canadian Centre for Behavioral Neuroscience and is part of a global research team studying the long-term effects of spaceflight. Dr. Metz, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, I'm Naveen Day on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.